Good afternoon, and welcome to Words and Music. Today we bring you an interview with Tobin Sprout, member of Matador recording label artists Guided by Voices. The interview is done by Dee Jung, host of the show Degrassi Keg Party, here on 93.3 CFMU.
I remember reading somewhere that there was talk about a Breeders' gig at Hair Arena with Urge Overkill. Did that ever pan out?
Yeah, well, I think originally that the Hair Arena show that we did was supposed to be with Urge Overkill and Breeders and us, and for some reason it didn't work out. But I think the Urge Overkill thing came about because they asked us if we'd tour with them. So that's how they just asked. And
it doesn't seem a totally unnatural pairing. You guys both have sort of an affinity.
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody else asked me that too, but I don't, a lot of their early stuff I think is, it's pretty much rocks out, and the newer, I like the newer stuff, and I don't think it's that odd. I mean, we're probably a little more poppier than they are or something, but I don't know, I've always liked their music, so.
You guys seem like a very unpackaged band.
Yeah, pretty much.
Very much ordinary. I mean, ordinary people are arguably the sort of latest trend in music or whatever. It's sort of the ordinary look, but you guys, it's not like it's a pose or anything. It just seems, like I can look on stage and say, oh yeah, he reminds me of my uncle, and there's the guy next door, and that's, whatever.
Yeah. I don't know. I think, what's pretty interesting is the way, I always liked the velvet jackets that Urge Overkill had. I mean, it was kind of tasteful. I mean, they all dressed the same, but it was, it wasn't, it wasn't common. I mean, it was unusual, to wear smoking jackets and turtlenecks and stuff. I thought that was pretty good.
But as you guys are, at least, I mentioned Bob today with the alien stuff.
Yeah.
Like Hometown Proud, or?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mitch knows it pretty well.
Yeah.
So he kind of got us hooked up with those guys, and I think from what I heard, Jamie Askins likes that stuff too, or knows the guy or something. But there's always alien T-shirts laying around for somebody to wear.
This is the biggest tour you guys have embarked on so far? I mean, this is what, like 20, 30 cities?
This is, well, it's broken up, so it's probably the longest tour, but we go home for 3 weeks, and while we're home, we're going to do 3 shows with Urge in Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland, and, so it's probably about 6 weeks altogether, but we're breaking it in 2, so it's I think the longest one we've done consecutive would have been the European tour, which is almost a month.
That was with Tammy and the Amps and Chavez?
Yeah, part of it. Chavez did the German part of it, and then we caught up with Tammy and the Amps in England and did, I think, 4 or 5 shows with them.
How'd that go?
Went well, yeah. And we know all those guys, from...
Is that your first time in Europe?
Yeah. I had been there before when I was a kid.
Phoenix or Glastonbury or what, on that? Didn't you guys you did a festival gig as well?
Yeah, we did Reading Festival and Poker Pop, and there's one other one, kind of 3 in a row. We ended up driving like 16 hours to do Reading and then 16 hours back, plus a ferry trip that was 3 hours across the channel. So
different than most of the touring.
To play 30 seconds, or 30
you guys
minutes.
have been just on. Just basically doing weekend tours before, though. I mean, I know you because you did Insects of Rock.
Yeah, that was the first tour, and that was it was probably the worst tour as far as just the driving, because we went from New York and Chicago and then straight out to Seattle.
Yeah, it was a lot of West
and
Coast
it was we had to do it, and we had to drive straight through. Ended up hitting a deer, and it was just kind of a mess. But
was that tied around some Lollapalooza dates as well, or?
No, I think Lollapalooza was after that or something. Yeah.
That was probably quite a
Lollapalooza
as well.
Yeah, Lollapalooza was great because we did all the local shows. I mean, pretty much St. Louis was probably the only time we had to stay overnight, so we could go do the show in the afternoon and then be home that night and then get up the next day around 11 and head out to the next one in Cincinnati, just everything within an hour and a half from us, so that made it nice.
Yeah. How do you figure the touring has affected the band? Like, since, I guess around the time of like Vampire and Propeller, you guys weren't doing that much touring, you guys were playing locally mostly. Mm-hmm. And then since then, the demand and the amount of touring you guys have been doing has sort of gone up exponentially.
Yeah, well,
how has that affected your, I mean, not your playing as a band, because obviously you guys have been different lineups, but you've been playing for some time.
Yeah.
But how has that affected, say, the studio aspect of that?
I don't know if it's affected the studio because we, even before we'd go in, the thing was we didn't play out since '84 or something like that was the last time we played out. So we never really needed a band. So there wasn't. I mean, which is one of the reasons why you see so many different names in there because Bob or I would want to put a song together and just get the people that were available and throw the song together. So we didn't actually work as a band as opposed to just sort of a songwriting guild where we get together in my basement or something and put them together and they end up being Guided by Voices albums. So, and then the first time we started playing out was for CMJ a couple years ago. And that was after we hooked up with Scat, and they wanted us to do these shows out, so we had to put a band together. So we recruited some of the guys from some of the earlier albums, like Kevin and Mitch, and just kind of put the band together. And it kind of changed quite a bit because now we have to think as a band instead of opposed to just recording in the basement with a couple people. I think the songs that we're doing now, we think in terms of how it's going to go, play as a band, and we think out all the parts that way.
Because I remember reading somewhere that there was, I don't know if there was Mitch or somebody that had, I think it was Mitch, that had some kind of a record or something like that for possession.
Right. Yeah.
That he had to check in every once in a while. That made even weekend tours difficult. So I don't know how
Yeah. Well,
what's the sort of the fact of the matter on all that?
On all that?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, he's got a problem with that. But I mean, we've worked it out. I mean, all he has to do is get certain papers. We thought he just couldn't get in at all. But once we researched it, we found out that he could. And so it'll work out with that. But I think one of the reasons we just when we just weren't that bit keen on touring, and we'd never done it. So I mean, we were kind of leery about touring, and then I think when we first started, we were touring around in Mitch's van with the floor falling out, and so I think that was one of the reasons we were sleeping on floors. And now we've got a couple of vans, and we're a little more comfortable, and we've got a place to sleep at night, and it's not quite as brutal as it used to be. So
you guys seem to enjoy playing live anyway.
Yeah, I think we do enjoy it, and I think we're starting to enjoy the touring a lot more too. I think the worst part of it is just being away from our families, but I think as long as we keep it down to two weeks, 3 weeks, and then go back for 3 weeks or whatever, I think it'll work out pretty well. And maybe in the future we can take them along with us or something, but it seems to be working out now.
Yeah. Because the approaches of the band seem sort of not vastly different, but markedly different.
Yeah.
Somebody who had heard Guided by Voices only on record would probably assume that the band was somewhat different live than you actually are. You're very sort of full-blown rock band, in the tradition of like the Who and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well,
and that's great. It's amazing, but what your studio aspect works amazingly as well. And it's not a misrepresentation of the band either. But how do you reconcile it? How do you work around it?
I don't know. I think it's interesting to see how some of the songs transform or over to the band. I mean, Kicker of Elves or one of the other ones, like Marches in Orange. The original version of that was just done on a little tiny organ. And but I mean, the melody was there and the chords were there, and we just once we put it into a band, I like both versions of it. I think it's kind of interesting to hear the difference between the live version and the recorded version.
Yeah. How do you? I know that you mentioned Marches in Orange, that and Dusted. Science. And I'm not sure. I haven't really been able to notice the difference on it, but I've read somewhere that Motor Away was redone as well. Mm-hmm. When can you is there a sort of an end to recording? Is a song ever sort of past the finish line?
Yeah.
Like with even Over the Neptune with into.
But that one went over pretty well because we had a band to begin with when we did that. So I like doing that one live a lot. It's we'll get to a point where what's a good example? My Valuable Hunting Knife. I think there's 3 different versions of that, and So it just depends. And the reason there's 3 versions of that is because the original one that was on the album wasn't. The Matador wanted something that the radio would play, and they thought that was probably the best, the hit off the album or whatever you want to call it. So they asked us to go in and re-record it with Andy Chernoff, and then I think that went on an EP for Scat, and yeah, that was with Scat when they wanted us to do that. So a lot of times we'll be finished with it, and somebody will ask us to do it again. So that's it. You might see 2 or 3 versions of it, but for the most part, we try to stick to the first one. Actually, I like I'm a Scientist. I still like the first version of that the best. And actually, the best version is the one that was on the video, because it was it's the same version that's on the album, except I went back in and added another guitar, layered it with another guitar before, just to have a little difference in it. I think that's probably the best version of it.
How your new album, or the forthcoming, the newest one, forthcoming album, recorded with Albanian Deal and extra stuff.
Yeah.
How does that stack up against stuff with Mike Hummel?
Mike Hummel didn't really do anything except EQ them, and because I did most of the recording I did all the recording on E11 and Alien Lanes, and then we took the tape down to Mike Hummel, and he put it on his EQ and kind of got it balanced a little more, because it had a lot of high end on it, and kind of got the sound that Bob wanted for it. But as far as the recordings, I've always done all the recordings on 4-track.
So I mean, as far as the recording approach goes, are you more comfortable with the sort of the band has hands-on control of this?
Yeah, definitely.
Stuff more?
Because that was the problem with the bigger studios, is we'd go in there and the engineers that were pretty much used to getting the best sound they couldn't understand why we didn't want that, or we wanted this real distorted sound or this real high pitch or something. So we finally found a studio at Cro-Mag that understands what we want and just says, yeah, whatever, and they've got 24 tracks, so we can, and it's still pretty rustic studio as far as that goes. So I think we've managed to get the feeling we have on the 4-track in the basement into the bigger studio.
Yeah, I find that interesting, is how you can achieve. I know that somebody like the Grifters can work with a 4-track and achieve sort of a 16 or 24-track sound out of it.
Yeah, well, they take their 4 tracks into a 24-track and then mix it down to the 4-track down. So they kind of use a little bit of the power equipment to get them to sound that way. But I think the Grifters get a great sound.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that I liked about like hardcore UFOs, where it sounds like the whole thing's going to collapse any minute, but it just keeps moving along, and there's dropouts on it and stuff. And we just couldn't go back and reproduce that song. I screwed up, some of the channels. I don't know how, but I mean that's why that is. And we had listened to it so many times that we began to like the breakdowns and the hisses and the pops and stuff. So. And even on the new album, there's only one that Kim did, and then one I think that Steve Albini did, and then for the most part, they're the ones that were done on the 8-track or in the Cro-Mag in the new studio that we've been working in.
With that, is that more of a meritocracy? Like, is it just like write as many songs as you want, put them forward, and we'll just pick the best ones?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. He always mentioned Blue Oyster Cult that had 3 writers, and with three people writing songs, you're always going to have the best stuff on the album. So I think he'll always have the bulk of it, because he can write like 10 songs a day when it gets rolling. So and Jim's got one on the EP after the album comes out. Jim's got a song on there, so he'll probably be writing a lot more.
Yeah. As far as the live stuff goes, do you feel like is it a totally different matter? Is it? I know that in the past on the Crying Your Knife Away, you do Esther's Day and Awful Bliss. But is that like something? Is it when it comes to live experience? Is it more sort of Bob centered, just because of the technique of the live band is centered around the whatever?
Right. Yeah. It looks one, Bob, that what's he going to do while, the focus is off or something. But we were doing some of my songs, like Sod, we played Sod Out live and some other ones, and he would sing them. And then there's other ones when they're requested, like Awful Bliss or Esther's Day or something like that, where if they request me to do a song, it's acoustic and I remember it, or I still know it or something, we'll do it. And, for the most part, I mean, we try to keep it focused just as a band.
Well, your song seems sort of somewhat different than Bob's anyway, in the feel of them.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of not to be sort of reductive, but sort of really kind of mercy beats built to it, some of the stuff you do. Whereas Bob seems to be like
out there,
all over the map.
Well, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, he gets into areas where, I don't know where he draws from, but I mean, he always pulls off a different type of song every once in a while. That's pretty interesting.
With all this new material, I was really sort of excited to see you guys signing with Matador and everything, but has that been more of a sort of restrictive relationship than you first imagined as far as releases go? Because I know that before it seemed like you were releasing 7 inches and EPs like all over the place, and little labels and stuff like that. How much has that changed now, or is it just like the demands of touring and stuff that have cut down your recording time?
No, because we've got, half the album that's coming out was a double, and so we've got the other half of that album, and then the 2 EPs. So we're still turning the stuff out. It's just that Matador doesn't want to release it, and so I mean, which is fine. I can understand why they don't want to, and we've got a stockpile of songs for. So I mean, we could put it together, 2 or 3 more albums just with the stuff that we have.
Does that mean like an increasing quality because you can sort of do you pick it an album once it's done, or do you sort of let it sit in the can?
We'll get to a point where we feel the album's finished, and then if it's going to sit there for a while, we're going to tinker with it, which is what happened with the last album. We got in, we recorded about 8 new songs, and started reworking the album, and took half of those and set them aside. So, and a lot of the songs, sometimes they won't fit on one album the way it feels, so it may show up 2 albums from now because it'll fit in more with that album.
How do you feel about the sort of proliferation of GPV bootlegs? Is that the sort of natural extension of sort of the increasing visibility of the band, or is it just because you think it's more because it's sort of a stopgap kind of thing between albums? Because I know before there was like I said there were it seemed not every month, but
there's
fairly regularly there's split 7 inches. There's pseudonymous 7 inches. There's that kind of stuff coming out. Anyway, it's a real chore almost to keep up with it, but not not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But the bootlegs have been fairly good quality for the most part. Like the really high profile ones.
Yeah, the last one that came out I thought sounded really good.
For All Good Kids.
Yeah. I mean, but I don't know. I think a lot of that is just because we've got a different sound on stage that's it's different from the album. So.